Well, guys, here we are on the day after the ban list. And unlike all your other favorite YouTubers who went out there and decided to do the whole crazy faces and then claimed the format was ruined, the format wasn't fixed, I decided to wait roughly 24 hours before I made my opinion and to kind of like think through some of the limits. And let's be honest, the unlimiteds really don't matter. What they unlimited don't matter, but like the forbidden and stuff like that. So if you guys enjoy these type of videos, please remember to hit that subscribe button, ding that notification bell. And here at Team COG, we're going to go through and kind of talk about the Forbidden Limited list that just came out yesterday with a little bit more calm head and a little bit more thought and process to it than just an immediate jump to it. So let's get on into it, shall we? All right, guys. So this ban list has been a lot of controversy. It's been like, did it fix the game? Did it not fix the game?
It's just not right. It's really eerie here. Something's fucky.
Is the game still garbage? Is this game in a better spot? Etc. So anyway, let's go ahead and look at the Forbidden, which is the most important part, I think, of the entire video here. We have 4 banned cards. We have Fiendsmith Lacrima, Appaloosa, Calamity, and Beatrice. Now, the only card that actually is missing on here that I think that should have been on here is Flameburge, but we'll talk about that when we get to the limited section here. So Lacrima, I mean, let's be honest, Lacrima was a pretty solid hit. I expected a Closed Moon to go before Lacrima did, but this card right here, I think, prevents the making of Beatrice on top of banning Beatrice. So it pretty much gives every deck with Beatrice being gone, Lacrima would just be making High King Caesar, which I think they can still do. Don't quote me wrong. I think they just have to make the Necro Princess, and then you special summon back out the Fiendsmith, and then you just overlay them. Don't quote me. I'm not fluent in whole Fiendsmith combo lines, but I do know this is a hit to like the the fluidity of that engine, but also it burns in time. The whole burning bull crap is actually quite garbage. I'm pretty happy. Like I'm sorry if you spend a lot of money on the engine, but if you think the engine's dead and you're going to sell it, I wouldn't do that either. I think the engine's still pretty good, but this was a pretty direct hit, which I foresee, like, people out there are like, oh, they'll never hit stuff that's too new. You guys haven't played the game long enough, or you're naive to think that Konami wouldn't hit something that directly came out like literally a set before. Konami's done it once. Konami will continue to do it, because at the end of the day, you guys got to remember, Konami is a company who wants to make money, but if the player base ain't happy, and there was such a strong outroar that something in the Fiendsmith had to be hit, you know, so Konami can't make money if the player base ain't buying product or going to events and stuff like that. So this was a pretty good hit, in my opinion. Like I said, I thought we'd see the Closed Moon go first because it had all the signs. You know, Closed Moon wasn't directly Fiendsmith. It linked the decks all together. It was a common, where that card's kind of nice, so like it should have been something higher than a common. But anyway, the great hit if you ask me. Personally, the Burning in Time. Does it suck for like the decks that are like Light Fiend decks that were using it, such as like the Magical Musket strategy, and I think there was like a few other like Fabled. I saw like a Fabled list or something like that was utilizing it that could bring back a Light Fiend. You know, like, yeah, that's sad, and it's just the collateral damage that Konami should have known. If this engine and this Fiendsmith engine was made fair in the first place, you know, it wouldn't be that big of a deal. Appaloosa, Bow of the Goddess. I'm kind of a mixed one on this one, but it does kind of like remove one of the biggest like negators that still exist out there. Any deck, your grandma's deck, your brother's deck, your sister's deck, the creepy guy down the streets, his deck can make Appaloosa, so should yours. And Appaloosa to rogue decks are good, but Appaloosa to meta decks are bad, because meta decks don't need to be able to smack Appaloosa down on top of whatever they do, Snake Eyes, for example, but they can do it. And that's what makes Appaloosa insane. Plus, you got to think that sometimes, man, you just throw your 4 monsters into Appaloosa, you put your opponent on, you better have like the few cards that out Appaloosa, and if you don't, you're just going to negate every monster effect they activate. However, Appaloosa, in a way, it's like kind of like a fair card. I mean, I'm not going to lie, it can only be used once per chain. It loses attack. It's no different than SP. Once you get it low enough, you just battle over it. But that's not the case with Appaloosa most of the time. Most of the time, it's Appaloosa backed with a lot of other things that can't be outed. So Appaloosa is just a little salt on the wound there. Hot Red Dragon Calamity, let's be honest, it was either this or the Crimson Dragon. However, Crimson Dragon does a lot for just synchro strategies in general, whereas Calamity doesn't do the same thing that Crimson does. And Crimson also just got confirmed for like a reprint. And also, let's be honest, Calamity's banned in every other format except ours, so it was only a limited amount of time. But there's no more losing to Calamity, no more throwing your 2 to 3 hand traps at like Centurion or like the Synchron deck, or like even Whitewoods for a little bit was able to do it. No more throwing your 2 to 3 hand traps at this deck to still lose, because they can still Calamity lock you through those type of things. And then finally, last but not least, Beatrice, the Lady Eternal, man. Let's you know, take a moment. The fact that Beatrice was more busted outside of her own archetype is a huge like design flaw that Konami made. But being able to send any card Foolish Burial twice is kind of wild. And then also with the Fiendsmith engine giving everybody access to it. Now, don't quote me, but I think in the Infernoble build of the Fiendsmith, without Beatrice being able to dump, you lose that bridge. So, like, Beatrice kind of was another bridge along with, like, Lacrima in a way to, like, mold all these decks to use this engine. So now we'll probably see it being played in a lot less decks, and I'll probably see it even played in a lot more decks that, like, the Fiendsmith stuff was, like, I can't even say, like, it was designed to help, like, Fiends, man, because, like, there's no restriction locking anything you do into, like, Fiends. It was literally just a solid, overpowered engine put out there for decks to be able to abuse and use. But now with a lot of the generic pieces, minus Lacrima, because Lacrima's a direct hit, the deck, and, like, Beatrice gone, like, the deck loses that ability to dump any card or any engine card to be able to get access back to it or be able to use it and stuff, so... Yeah, I mean, that's pretty solid. We'll go over and go next here to the Unlimited. Like, again, Unlimited, no one really cares about. Red Rose Dragon's kind of nice, considering it's been gone for a hot minute. So there isn't really anything to talk about here, in my opinion. My buddy plays Lab, so time still might be kind of crazy with Lab. Can do some crazy, you know, stuff, too. I think Plushfire got an errata. Red Armageddon Knight to 3 with his old gone. The Dark Warrior stuff is a thing of the past. But Limited. So here we are in the Limited section, and this is probably the heaviest hitting section in my opinion outside of the band. I mean, of course, like, I even say this is honestly a little bit bigger just because of the cards that come off of it rather than the cards that go on it. That's why it makes it a little bit bigger than the band section. But Eva's been gone since, you know, the time of Durytron Fairy stuff. So, like, and the way that I think Eva was being used was the Union Carrier. So as long as Union Carrier is gone, like, this card can come back. Especially with Bestials lurking around, too. Like, this card, I mean, that's why it's at 1. They're going to test the waters. Snake Eyes, Ash, and Poplar. Yeah, those are, like, we're happy to see those. In fact, I'd have been happy to see these along with Flameburge ban. And the deck, I still think, could do a lot of crazy things. But as long as Flameburge exists, it's kind of, you know, the deck still has something going for it. And maybe that's the why the Konami wanted it, because of the new stuff coming out. I know that we talked about this the night before at Locals, that there's, like, a new level 4... Snake Eyes coming out. They didn't want to probably slaughter the deck to bolster sales that way. But I think, honestly, if you would have hit Flameburge and left these cards alone, I'd have been just as happy. I think it would probably have been just a big enough impact, because everyone's like, well, you don't have, like, a boss monster, but they have that new Diabellstar Snake Eyes card that can just, like, substitute. Is it like Flameburge? No. But it's, like, a decent enough card to keep the deck alive if that's, like, the way that you want to do it. But... a few people in my Discord brought up pretty well that even with these limits here, like, Snake Eyes still has, like, 1 to, like, 10 plus 1-card combos, and all this does is make opening Poplar a brick. That's really all it does. And, like, for me, when I tried to play Snake Eyes variants, opening Poplar all the time, literally every hand, maybe not even want to play Poplar and, like, move on to different builds and stuff like that. So you won't see me touch a Snake Eyes deck. But, I mean, maybe these are some good consistency hits to where, like, you stop Ash. But, like, it's kind of crazy because, like, Ash, Oak, and even, like, the worst one I think is Birchright. They all require, like, 2 hand traps to stop them. You Ash the first effect, then they, like, tag out into the second effect, which is, like, you have to, like, smack Imperm on them or Effect Railer to negate the whole effects to be able to stop the whole thing. So, like, as you guys can see, and, like, that wasn't banned, and there's no, in the spell section down here, there's no OSS, which I'm happy for sure, because OSS I think is a phenomenal card for fire strategies that play level 1 fires, such as Infernobles and Synchrons on top of that, because they can summon Jet. But it's still just good for Snake Eyes, and that just gives them more consistency. You know, which wanted and OSS allow them to pretty much get into their 1 Ash, so Ash being down. There's no bonfires you can see either, so there's still many, like, you know, ways to search out Ash and all this type of stuff. So anyway, Ash can't search Ash anymore, so that's good. Poplar, again, brick. Number 40 and number C40, I think this was just, like, their way to, like, kind of fake us out, because I think the deck can still FTK with these 2 cards being limited. It was just a way to put them on the list to be like, yeah, we know it's there. Here's just, like, a little fake slap to make it seem like we're doing something. Branded Fusion. Branded Fusion's kind of an interesting one. Branded Fusion has been around forever. It is needed to be touched for a long time, but, like, in a format where it's not really doing that well, you know what I mean? It's, like, a kind of odd time to hit it. Almost in the way, like, they touched Isolde, like, 3 or 4 years after Isolde was an issue. Like, Branded Fusion now, like, I guess every Branded player's, like, already assuming their, like, Branded Fusion's going to get ashed, you know? So they're already able to play with just 1 Branded Fusion. So it's kind of an odd but, like, well-timed hit, in opinion. It's interesting they decided to go for the Branded Fusion aside from the Puppet Lock, especially since, like, the public outcry for that has been tremendous since the inception of Branded, but instead they're touching the Fusion. Maybe I mean, I don't know. I watch a few branded players, not like Pack and that Meta Games GX and stuff like that. So like, maybe a branded fusion really doesn't matter. Actually, I take that back because I was watching like Meta Games, like literally puppet lock people with just the one fusion. So it literally did nothing. It did nothing. Yeah, like you get Ash on fusion and like it's a little bit more rough, but like literally the entire like player base that plays branded has moved on to like they already expect branded fusion to get Ash, so they might as well just fuse and do like the deck can do more than just branded fusion now. So opening the Spirit Gates is a hit to YuGiOh. I mean, yeah, but not the hit. I think for me personally, I know a lot of people, this should have been a slobber knocker. I mean, a straight hit. Like, not... I think the only deck that deserved to be completely unplayable was Snake Eyes. That's because we were forced to deal with it for so long because of Konami wanting to make sales and see what the format would unfold for Nationals, knowing darn well it would have. And if you would have banned Snake Eyes then, you still would have had, like, Fiendsmith still outperforming a lot of things. But anyway, the opening of Spirit Gates is a slap to YuGiOh. Like, not even that bad, man. Like, truly... if you wanted to go after that deck, you should have gone at it a little bit harder. Maybe even putting the Phantom to 1 would have been a better correct hit. But yeah, I think this list should have been a slobber knocker, and I wanted it to be, and I think a lot of players did, and it's not even like close to that. It's more like just literally a slight slap on the wrist of these decks, and that's a little infuriating, especially since, like I said, like just literally 2 seconds ago, we had to sit through like a whole like longer format than we should have because of Konami wanting their greed of wanting to sell cards and stuff like that. And yeah, like the list isn't, it's like there's no payoff here. Like, all right, we got a longer format, but you gave us a good list. But by any means, I don't think the list is terrible, but I don't think it's great either. So anyway, Open the Spirit Gates is like, it seems to be the only hit to YuGiOh, which again, like what the Spirit Gates do is insane, but I would have liked to have seen a little harder hit, but it's okay. Pot of Prosperity is pretty much a card I think for a long time people wanted to see go to 1, because like literally dig 3, dig 6 deep, and like, if you take Prosperity, again, like kind of like Apollos in a way, like what it's like in a vacuum, what it's for, dig 3 or dig 6 to get your engine going is good. But when you have these better decks that are digging 3, digging 6 to just get either more hand traps, board breakers, or extra engine, it's too good, guys. It's literally too good. And the only restriction is you can't draw. Like, not every deck's going to be like, this is their deck's draw. Like, you know what I mean? And maybe this was like maybe like a universal hit to a lot of like combo decks and stuff like that around. Like some decks out there, like literally it's just kind of wild. Like you interact with them, or like their hands barely playable and they activate Pot of Prosperity and draw the 1 card they needed, or excavate the 1 card they need. And that's kind of like infuriating because you've already spent your stuff and they're going to dig 6 cards into their deck, which the probability of seeing the card they're looking for is higher that way. This card's good at 1. I think at 1 it's good. It just means, like, now for sure you're going to ash it, because I always learned that if they dig for 3, that's bait. But if they're digging for 6, that means they need it, so you ash it. Sengen Summoning, that was a slap to Tempai. And I think Pot of Prosperity also could have been, like, a light slap to Tempai, because Tempai's was one of those decks to where, like, since they could OTK under it, they were just able to dig for board breakers and, like, extra push to, like, OTK. And that was just too insane that a deck could, like, one-punch you under, like, Pot of Prosperity where your damage is half. That's kind of wild. But Sengen Summoning is like a consistent hint to that deck, and it just allows you to have more interaction with little dragons. Hopefully this will kind of check them. They still technically can play like 3 copies of it with Terraforming and set rotation, but that's okay. That grass looks greener. At 1, I don't think we'll see a lot of it. I don't know if that card, Left Arm Offering, is still legal, but like that's a way to search. The grass looks greener. So the card's like crazy, man. It'll be cool to see like 60 card decks show up, man, but I'm really gonna hate. I don't know if this works. We talked about it yesterday. Player goes, that grass looks greener, and the person goes, well, that's a shame, and change Shifter. And if that works, that's just gonna be that's just awful. That's also another thing I want to talk about. Shifter not on here. I think that Shifter has, like, again, just because the community hates it, I don't think like sometimes like it deserved, but Shifter is like one of those cards that I really don't like, and they've been a lot of conversation in the community about. And if you guys want to hear like do like a discussion video about Shifter, I'll bring in some of my players and stuff like that, and maybe we can sit down and do like a round table cast, like where we can talk about some things like that. But Shifter, in my opinion, is a very toxic and very unskillful card that literally punishes players putting time and effort into the game. So like it's just infuriating to sit down across like Joey Wheeler, and like you've put hours and hours in, and like, I'm gonna whoop this guy, and he goes standby phase Shifter, and you didn't draw your 1 of called by, so you like lose because the player's luckier than you are. And there's different layers of luck, because I know luck's a big thing of the game, but Shifter is like, you know what I mean? Like, especially with call by being at 1, like the answer we have to Shifter is literally we're less lucky. We should just be just as lucky to draw our answer to Shifter as they are just as lucky to have Shifter. But we can make a whole video on why I think Shifter's a horrible card. And like every video, there's like a podcast out there with the Five Shatter and Galzelio YuGiOh, I think, or something like that. And they talk about how Shifter is like a bad card that makes bad players seem good and punishes good players, etc. Anyway, Skill Drain card. Honestly, I didn't even think this card would be touched because it's like one of the easier floodgates to out. But like as they've been following sequence, every floodgate, every continuous trap that stops the opponent from playing has been put to 1, which means it's a little bit more sacky to see. It also means that you're less likely to draw into and see it. And like I guess this was like the main issue with like cards like even like White Forest, Runic, and then like Runic Stun in general is the fact that this card is still at 3. So hopefully this address will do it pretty good. Now let's move on to the semi-limited. This I could care less about. Every one of the Blaster, Redox, Tempest tile, long time coming. I mean, like, we're still pretty solid, I think. Lunalight Tiger to 2 is kind of cool. Colossus to 2. I'm surprised that they didn't address like the Banshee or the Nemesis Corridor because so many decks having access to a Colossus is kind of crazy. That definitely should have been addressed this list and bring it. But I know 2 Thunder Dragons were brought back because they want pure Thunder Dragon. But like you're not going to get pure Thunder Dragon as long as like there's better decks out there that are going to be able to play this like a smaller package, right? So anyway, but actually fall back to Shifter. Thunder Dragon, Ritual Beast are like cards like those decks I actually like with Shifter because Shifter like moves the strategy forward rather than, oh, I can just play under it versus you can't. So because my deck has flexibility to that and yours don't, you know what I mean. But anyway, yeah, this has been like long enough video. I'm not going to do it any more longer, but that's pretty much it. I think time was still going to tell, you know, like y'all need to just kind of chill and say like the decks are dead, the decks are good, the decks are still alive. Time will tell. Well, the only time really, like I said, will show like is Snake Eyes still consistent enough. Sure, we feel like it is on paper, but there have been plenty of times when we're like, oh, these decks after these hit will still seem to be best, but like since YuBell was barely slapped, like maybe YuBell like overtakes Snake Eyes and then Snake Eyes falls away. We've seen it with Brandon multiple times, man, where Brandon was like an overpowering deck and then just power creeps hit Brandon just enough to where Brandon falls back to the dedicated player base and it's just like there and Brandon's doesn't pop its head, you know what I mean? So it's just like I said, only time will tell. Hopefully these hits are enough to kind of like razzle up the format, you know, but I personally don't feel like, I feel like these are all just slaps on the wrist and these decks were so far ahead. Maybe if the Fiendsmith didn't exist, maybe if the Fiendsmith engine wasn't out and it was just pure YuBell and pure Snake Eyes and stuff like that, it would bring the level down. But the fact that the Fiendsmith stuff is out there still and can be used by these decks are just so far above that these slaps didn't even bring them down enough to even be on par with, like, you know, in my opinion. But anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. Stay safe, stay healthy. This is Charles and Team COG signing out.